I'm a librarian for a private tertiary education institution that offers papers in leadership, ministry, early childhood education, web design, counselling, and contemporary Christian music. As sole charge librarian, I work 2 days a week with a collection of around 10,000 items. I have to be jack of all trades and, as the saying goes, that means that I'm master of none. If you're expecting me to talk about how to start using the Koha software or to discuss its merits and weaknesses, then I'm sorry, you might be disappointed. There won't be any screenshots or library photos either. At this point in a conference, you've probably seen enough of those. So what will there be? In my spare time, I have been known to get on the back of a Harley motorbike and go for a ride. So I thought I would share with you briefly a metaphorical trip report of my journey with Koha so far. So I invite you to sit back and enjoy the ride and the scenery. Every trip has a beginning. It usually involves ideas, possibilities, planning, discussing, and looking at the options. This trip began with a conversation with the campus head of IT, whom I shall refer to as the IT lad because of his being the same age as my son. One morning he casually came into the library for a chat and asked, "How would you feel about a new library software program?" Knowing what I did about the organisation, I replied, "So, you're looking at Koha, are you?" He seemed somewhat surprised by my mind-reading skills, but 8 years in the organisation had taught me that they preferred low-cost or free options when making financial commitments. The IT lad had decided that Koha was a tempting alternative to our present system, and, in his words, a bonus was that it would save an extra $100 a year by not having to send me on the annual software refresher update workshops. So, what could I say but, yes, I'll give Koha a go. Let's go for a ride. I had no experience with MARC records. I only worked 2 days a week. I worked on my own. Of course I could do it. The IT lad kindly downloaded the manual for Koha, all 800 pages of it, and said, "Check it out." I felt like he was asking me to ride a fully loaded touring Harley when my feet barely reached the ground. But, ready or not, I was on my way, and about to discover lots of corners and hills on the way. I read lots of warnings and found terms that seemed to have changed their meaning since I was at library school. I discovered, along with IT lad, that our present system, set up before my time, could not easily be migrated to Koha, so each item would need to be entered one at a time. I discovered that IT lad was not going to involve any outside agency to assist in the process. He had the knowledge and there was no extra money. It was he and me. There was no library-skilled go-to person for help. IT lad seemed surprised a few weeks later when he asked how it was going, and I replied that I was still reading the manual. Eventually he realized I was no Koha mechanic. Sitting on the bike is fine, along with knowing when to lean into corners and when to sit up straight, but actually tinkering with the carburetor is outside my skill set. So he sat down with me and we wrestled with getting the first item onto Koha. There were quite a few false starts. He thought I could just go along the shelves and scan the ISBN barcodes and the job would be done. No checking the records, no copying and pasting all the carefully created tables of contents from the old system. The CEO thought the whole job would be done over the Christmas break at 2 days a week. So the hill climb began. And there were the usual speed bumps. Computer problems that seemed to be part of daily life in any organisation. Some days the server was down or the internet was dodgy. Some days I got to the point where I felt cross-eyed from cutting and pasting, backwards and forwards, from old to new, backwards and forwards. Eventually IT lad realised that progress was a bit slow and that perhaps 2 screens would speed things up a bit. Finally, I got to feel a bit of the speed that a nice long straight offers. One day, after about 3 or 4 months of entering data, I logged on to find all my work had disappeared. I quietly panicked. Koha sat there riderless, going nowhere. So I logged the job with ANZTLA and nervously waited to see if I had to start back at the very beginning again and repeat the whole journey. Eventually, ANZTLA found the missing records and I was back on track, but not before I had given serious consideration to finding another ride to explore elsewhere, with a few less stressful corners and hill climbs. After about 12 months, I was about 1/7 of the way through the trip, and it felt like there were a few less hills and corners, although there was this nagging feeling lurking in the background that I still did not feel the map and the journey matched. And, sure enough, one day recently, while checking a record, I discovered that the subject heading that I had assigned to a title did not show on the OPAC record. I started going back over some of the titles I had already done, and there were more. Time to look at the map again. I couldn't find anything in the manual that seemed to help, except that maybe the problem was in the initial setup. Time to send an SOS for roadside assistance from ANZTLA. He said he was very busy and would get back to me later. In the meantime, I realised that potentially the trip so far has been a waste of time. I'd come to a stop sign and I wasn't sure which way to turn. I sought advice from an ANZTLA colleague who uses the same software that we currently use. She asked me why we were changing. I said cost, web catalogue, self-issuing and multiple campuses were some of the reasons given to me. She said the existing program does all that. So, it was time to get off the bike and go and talk to my boss. I explained the situation. At the moment, we are re-evaluating the whole process. So when I was asked last year to do this talk, I expected that I would have completed the journey and could show you a nice sunset with which to finish the trip report. Instead, there's a cafe break. Overall, Koha seems like a good riding mate, although I am not sure if I fully understand my co-rider Mark record yet. And I'm not sure that I ever will. At 2 days a week, sole charge and no real cataloguing expertise, I am not sure that Koha is the right choice for our library without paying for professional support. But in the meantime, I think I will just get on the real Harley and enjoy the ride.